the single clenched fist, lifted and ready, or the open asking hand, held out and waiting. Choose, for we meet by one or the other. These are words by the American poet Carl Sandburg. And we've seen in the last 24 hours the consequences of the clenched fist. How are we to react? With more clenched fists, or with that vulnerable open hand? Moderator, we're proposing to bring an additional deliverance in the light of what's happened in Manchester to the Assembly after the report is taken. And that sentiment by Sandburg contrasts what the world looks like to so many people today with the world that Christ would like it to be. In our report, the term surveillance from the cross might have baffled a few of us, and it certainly baffled me when I first read it. But in the harsh world in which we live, the big data world, the world of random terrorism, where people's online activity follows them forever and you cannot have your past misdemeanors forgiven, where keyboard warriors lash out and there's no mercy, where people's anger and alienation is expressed in the killing of children, there are clenched fists all around us. And surveillance from the cross means looking out on the world with Christ's hands, his open hands, stretched out on the cross, forgiving a common criminal who was crucified beside him, the asking hand held out and waiting. And that is Christ's way. That is the church's way. That is our way. The open hand of vulnerability. We're bringing this in the light of the events of the last 24 hours. And I'll read what we're proposing to add to our deliverance. Express profound sadness at the attack at Manchester Arena and the tragic and pointless loss of life. Affirm the courage and grace with which Manchester is already responding. Call on the church to continue to foster deep relationships across communities and commit us to pray for all those affected. I think it's quite self-explanatory. And can I just commend the last speaker? The importance of that vulnerable space where we offer the open hand is our space, for it is the way of Christ. And it is so important for us in a time when it would be so easy to react, so easy to respond with prejudice, with fear, with a feeling that there are all sorts of people responsible who of course are not, that we need especially to build those global friendships and those friendships within our own communities with those whose lives and whose beliefs are different to our own. It is also so important, I think, for us to recognize the immense courage of those who do not run away, but run towards the chaos, offering that open hand of care and support and love. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Is this seconded? Seconded. Thank you. Jamie Harrison.
Jamie Harrison, 719. Moderator, Thank you very much for all you've said and done as someone who comes from England for and on our behalf this morning. Your prayers, your wise words, the new deliverance and the convener's moving speech just now. I grew up in Manchester, so for me this is home territory. I now live in the northeast of England, and as many of you will know, quite a few who have been affected have come as those going to a party and going to a concert from the northeast of England to Manchester. And of course, Manchester is not immune from acts of terrorism. Back in 1996, the IRA exploded a very large bomb in the centre of Manchester. And last night, we understand, a lone suicide bomber set off an explosive device to devastating effect. At least back in 1996, the IRA gave a 90-minute warning so that 75,000 people were evacuated and the damage was done to buildings with injuries but no fatalities. Sadly, last night there was no such warning. Bishop David Walker, the Bishop of Manchester, sent a tweet out which I think we can all respond to. He says, "Please hold the people of Manchester in your prayers." He says, "We've faced terror attacks before, and this latest one won't defeat us." And I'm sure David will speak for all the people and all the faith communities of Manchester, not just the Christians, but those of other faiths and of no faith. Coming from the northeast, as I say, I'm aware of those who travelled in the hope of what my bishop called a great night out, spoiled beyond measure. Wanton attacks on innocent and vulnerable people, many of whom we know to be children. As I say, I was born and bred in Manchester, so this tragedy strikes home. I was one who would go up to town from the suburbs to a concert, to a meal, to meet with friends. It's so normal and therefore even more terrible. As a doctor, I'm frequently reminded of the fragility of life. And here again, life is fragile, as it is, of course, for so many across the world, in so many parts that we see on our television screens and on our tablets. And it reminds us, too, of the wonderful gift of life that God gives us, so fragile yet so wonderful. As a good Anglican, I suppose I should end with words of Justin Welby from today. He says this: "Heroic Manchester, dark evil cannot overcome it. We pray for those in sorrow on the hard journey of loss and of pain, and for those who protect us." Moderator, thank you again for your prayers, for your good wishes, and I thank you very much from me, and if I may, from the Church of England.
And please do pass on our prayers and our good wishes to the Bishop of Manchester and the Church of England, and tell them what we have said and done here today. Thank you. Kevin Watson.
Kevin Watson, 715, moderator of the General Assembly of the United Reformed Church. I'm to thank our convener of the Church and Society Council for bringing this deliverance. As the previous speaker has reminded us, we are to learn from those Palestinians and those Israelis who have that open hand of welcome. I met a lady in Hebron, a Muslim lady. I think she was in her 60s or 70s. I saw her physically abused by soldiers. I heard her story of abuse by the government and by the other community. What was her response to that time? I asked her what kept her having hope, and she said, "It is, I get everyone to plant something because it says we still have a future. I get everyone to recycle everything because it says we still care for the earth. And anyway, it's all in Allah's hands." I hope we as Christians have that same openness, that same faith that I certainly heard from you, moderator, this morning. And I thank you for your sensitivity and your generosity of prayer for the folk of Manchester and beyond, wherever the victims have come from. But to the lady speaker who talked about that learning from others, openness, I'm particularly grateful, because it is now that our sisters and brothers in the Muslim community, whoever was to blame for this atrocity, it is our relationship with them that is in danger because of the clenched fist and the reaction of fear and of drawing up drawbridges and putting up barriers. This is the time we need to be working together. And I think of the lady in Hebron. It is getting to know, it is befriending, it is listening, it is respecting, but then it is the next thing is working together. And what you said in this morning about the victory of love, it is when we work together after Manchester's atrocity, to hear this morning of the wonderful deeds of kindness and support from that community, and then to come here this morning and to receive your support and prayers. I thank you.
Bishop Joe Aldred.
Joe Aldred, number 731, representing Churches Together in England. Moderator, I feel the same depth of sadness and grief like everyone else. I often refer to myself as the descendant of enslaved people who have a long history of pain. And it makes me very sensitive to the pain that goes on pretty much all the time in parts of the world. And what visited Manchester last night, sadly, is a recurring reality for too many communities in other parts of the world. And so as we think of Manchester, I want to encourage us to think about how, as a global village, we throw our arms around the world and live with that sense of shock and sometimes righteous anger and indignation when we so easily make little, sometimes nothing at all, of some of the activities around the world, when we really ought to speak up and say, this is not right. I'm thinking, even as I stand here, of recently when the mother of all bombs was dropped in Afghanistan. And just recently we've heard of the signing of a 100 billion arms deal in Saudi Arabia. And these are not without their consequences and impact on the lives of human beings around the world. And so I put Manchester within that same arena of pain and human loss, and ask us to continue to pray and to work hard for the peace of the world. I was very struck by the words of one of the songs that we sang today, which hope for the time when to plowshares men shall beat their swords, and to pruning hooks their spears. Just finally, the presidents of Churches Together in England, into which, of course, Manchester comes, have put out a statement today, which I would like to read. Our thoughts and prayers are with all those bereaved and injured by the cruel, senseless, terrorist attack in Manchester. May God grant them strength and courage. Our faith teaches us that even the worst of evils can never defeat love. So we pray that the people of Manchester, of all faiths and none, will discover a renewed unity as they respond to this atrocity with compassion, dignity, and hope. I thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne Fletcher.
Every Suzanne Fletcher, number 74. Just a brief word of personal reflection. The reason that I was late for worship this morning sounds cliche, but in part was to do with hugging your children a little tighter after these sorts of incidents happen. But it was also because one of the children, one of the pupils in my daughter's class, was at this concert last night. Thankfully, she and her aunt are safe and sound and will be returning to Scotland soon. But many other Scottish people, as they said on the radio on the way in, were there too, because this concert was only offered south of the border. It is with open arms that we encircle our own families, and that we indeed are called to encircle the global village with prayer. And I am thankful to many people in this assembly and in other places who have done that in prior acts of terror, and in particular the first year I was here following 9/11. However, I think it is very apt to note the previous speaker's insistence that we think of this in terms of all the children of the world who may be affected in any way by any act of terror or violence, and to continue our prayers for them most readily. And so I would ask the convener if the council might, perhaps in conjunction with other councils, consider words which might help those of us who respond to this in our own families, in our communities, particularly in school assemblies, to help us to find the words that the psalmist used in Psalm 46. Stop fighting and know that I am God. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you have found the words already, and thank you for sharing them with us. Ian Greenshields.
Moderator Greenshields 432 from Dunfermline Presbytery. Moderator, I wonder how many of our Muslim friends are feeling this morning. Recently in Dunfermline Presbytery, we extended the hand of friendship to the local mosque and asked the chairman of the local mosque and some others to come to our presbytery and to speak at our presbytery. This they did. We extended the hand of friendship to them and they to us. We have continued that relationship, and our friends in the local Muslim community and the mosque had the confidence to approach us and ask us to extend to our own churches an invitation to come to an open day at their mosque. Now is the time for us to continue extending that hand of goodwill and friendship to our local Muslim friends and to our local mosques, because their vulnerability will be very great at this time, and it is our responsibility in the name of Christ to extend the hand of friendship and love and grace to them.
Thank you. Iris Maxfield.
Iris Maxfield, 834. I will keep this brief because as the convener and a number of the commissioners have spoken so beautifully and much more eloquently than I can, but as the youth rep for the Presbytery of England, I felt that I ought to say, well, I wanted to say something. And I'd just like to extend kind of my thank you to everyone who's spoken so wonderfully and offering prayers as someone who is English, hence the accent. To feel that while my home is under attack, I very much I'm still surrounded by such loving people and have created a home within the Church of Scotland. And I'd just like to say, while we keep praying, I also think it's our duty to keep going out and to keep going to concerts and to, yes, have that open hand, and every so often have that open hand up in the air dancing. So, thank you.
Thank you. We have heard some wonderful things here today. Thank you all to have contributed. Convener, do you wish to reply?
Just to say, moderator, this is a moment to feel a deep sense of gratitude and pride to this gathering. This is the General Assembly at its very best. So everyone should take home to their places the story of how we have conducted ourselves this morning. How important it is for us to be part of that company that speaks of love and reconciliation and the costly work of being peacemakers in this world. Not peacekeepers, peacemakers. That is our role. So thank you for being so gracious. It feels like a huge honor to be part of this gathering. Thank you, moderator.